That's obviously stupid, and I'm not going to do that. But when something sounds like it's reasonable, it sounds smart, and you suggest it, and it turns out to be a really bad idea, bad ideas can easily carry the day when they're couched in the right language and they appeal to somebody's sense of what is reasonable. Okay. You can indeed over-automate. I said one of the metrics that we look at in our assessments is this percentage of tests automated. And I think this is a good thing. It's good to automate. Certainly certain kinds of tests, regression tests, performance tests, stress tests, these are things that need to be automated. But you try to automate too many things, and you start to get into the situation that Douglas Adams lampooned in his book, The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe, where the people program a computer to determine what the meaning of life is and the answer to all ultimate questions. And the computer, after centuries and centuries of thinking about this, comes back and says the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is 42. Basically, a computer is designed to do certain kinds of things, and to the extent that that what you're trying to do in testing fits with what a computer can do, then that's great. But you start asking a computer what the meaning of life is, or asking a computer to run tests that aren't actually automatable, then that's not making sense. That's not an intelligent use of automation capabilities or an intelligent use of your scarce resources. And I say scarce, I mean if I'm making a bad assumption there that your resources are not scarce and that you have all the resources in the world, then God bless you for that. You are one of the few. Most of our clients are dealing with scarce tested resources. So it's important that if you're going to think about doing something, it can be as upfront expensive as automation, that you do it on the right things. Now, what's a simple rule of thumb here on what to automate versus what not to automate? Well, a simple rule of thumb is if a test requires frequent tester intervention to run, in other words, it cannot run unattended for any great length of time without a tester having to engage and try to keep it going, or if the test requires tester intervention to interpret its results. In other words, there is no reliable test oracle. There is no way that you can set up something that the automated tool can automatically look at and say, okay, this is what the correct answer is, whether that's a baseline file or a legacy system or something like that. If you can't do that in an automated way, that's not really an automatable test. So frequent tester intervention, tester interpretation of results required. Either one of those things is a red flag that spending time trying to automate this is probably not a good use of your time. Now, I'll give you an example of over-automation, and this is one that those of you who heard me talk about the 10 stupid things, you've heard me use this example before. It's telling a story on myself, which is always allowed. This is the automated testing that we created for a multi-operating system, multi-database query tool, where we tried to get 100% regression test coverage of all of these different operating system database supported combinations. And we were so fixated on that we were ignoring serious quality risks in the areas of usability and installation and configuration and so forth. Basically, we were just focused on things that were important, but we focused on them beyond the point of diminishing returns, which I think is an important thing to keep in mind. I gave a simple rule of thumb for determining whether a test was or wasn't automatable on the previous slide, but also keep in mind that even if you're dealing with a set of tests which are theoretically automatable, that you are going to reach a point of diminishing returns, and this is related to Boris Beiser's pesticide paradox, where he was saying, running the same set of tests over and over again is like spraying a pesticide on a field over and over again. Eventually, it stops killing bugs. Yeah, I think you can extend the pesticide paradox to say that if you've got a set of tests that are very similar and you've automated, say, 90% of those tests or 75% of those tests or maybe even 50% of those tests, you might very well, in trying to automate the remainder of those tests, have reached a point of diminishing returns. By diminishing returns, I mean that the value that you receive for automating those tests is not equal to the value that you could receive from automating something else, or perhaps even doing something else that was not related to automation. So keep that in mind. That you know, you can definitely have too much of a good thing, even if with automation, even if it did start out to be a good thing to automate a particular set of tests. Now I'll give you another case study here. As we saw with a client of ours, they wanted to automate compatibility testing. This is a hardware company, and you know, one of the things that they're worried about is application compatibility, operating system compatibility, driver compatibility on their systems. And they decided, oh, well, we're going to try to automate this compatibility testing because there's so much of it. You know, we have to run these same compatibility tests over and over again against every one of these platforms. Well, that sounds great. You know, I mean, you think, okay, yeah, you know, automating a repetitive testing task, that's classic test automation sweet spot. Well, no, because ultimately, even though they were able to automate the tests themselves, every 30 to 60 minutes, there needed to be some sort of software install done, and there didn't seem to be any way around that, and they spent a whole lot of time trying to come up with a way of these things running unattended, and just never could do it. And they spent, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on tools and effort and so forth trying to make this work, and ultimately had to give it up. So, you know, as I said, tests that require frequent tester intervention are really not going to give you a lot of benefit, because the tester, I mean, if they have to come back and check on the tests every 30 to 60 minutes, that really doesn't allow them to do a whole lot of value in that brief interval of time. I mean, yes, they can go read their email, but, you know, email is a total hamster wheel, right? The more you send, the more you get. So the whole idea of having somebody freeing up a bunch of time so that somebody can spend more time reading and sending emails, to which they will then have to read and send responses, you know, that's not actually a meaningful savings of time. Okay, so blended is better. Now, by this I mean, when I say blended is better, what I'm talking about here is that we want to avoid getting stuck in a single way of thinking about testing, okay, and a single way of approaching it. Imagine if you were hiring a carpenter to do some work in your house, and this guy came to you. You talk to this guy over the phone. He sounded reasonable. The guy came to you, and he said, "Okay, I'm here." And you said, "Where's your toolbox?" He says, "I don't need a toolbox. I've got everything I need right here." And he's got hanging from his tool belt a single thing, a hammer. And he says, "You know, I'm able to do everything that I need to do with this hammer. And you know, anything that doesn't involve using this hammer doesn't need to be done, and I can do everything that I have to using this one tool." And I think, unfortunately, we see that with clients. We see that in this field, that there are people who are inflexibly stuck on one test strategy or one test tactic. So we run into people who are, you know, 100% focused on automation. It's like, well, you know, any test we want to do, it's got to be automatable. We don't want to do any manual testing at all. Well, yeah, but then that basically you're assuming that there are no important quality risks related to things which either require frequent intervention or a tester being involved to interpret the results.